Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Kengia Sabree, your HIM certification coach. In this video, I want to give you some best practices as it relates to different components of the RHIA exam. I have a class starting this week. I'm super excited, and I want you to follow along with us, listen to some of our videos as it relates to the domain, especially if you're self-studying. Tell us what you're doing. Maybe we can do this together. Or if you are struggling to do it on your own, I advise you to join one of our classes. We offer a 6-week class, or we have a weekend warrior workshop, which allows us to cover all 6 domains of the RHIA exam over the course of a weekend. So in this video, again, as I mentioned, I'm going to go over some best practices as it relates to information governance. So if you are a member of AHIMA, there is an information governance toolkit in the body of knowledge. It's a little bit older, but it's full of great information. That is one of my favorite resources. So take the time, download it, and read it as a part of your resources for this domain. So AHIMA defines information governance as an organization-wide framework for managing information throughout its life cycle and supporting the organization's strategy, operations, regulatory, legal, risk, and environmental requirements. So, best practices. I want to give you at least 5 or 6 best practices according to AHIMA to help you better understand this domain. Best practice number 1, when it comes to information governance, we always want to make sure we establish the leadership. So designate an IG leader who's responsible for overseeing the development, the implementation, and the maintenance of the IG program. So this leader should have the authority. Okay, so that's another key. I like to say key in the term when it comes to governance. Who has the authority? Who has the responsibility? Who makes the decision? Okay, when it comes to information. Okay, so again, this leader should have the authority and the resources to execute the necessary initiative. 2, every organization has to develop an IG framework, okay? Create a framework that outlines the key components of the organization's information governance program. So this framework should include policies, procedures, and guidelines for managing information throughout its life cycle. If you are working in HIM, I encourage you to look up your information governance framework or your policies that was used, or that's supposed to support the framework that was used, okay, or that is used throughout your organization. This will kind of give you a better idea of how information should be managed throughout your organization. So no, that's not going to be, every organization is different. So I don't want you to rely on that information for the exam, but what I want you to do is listen up, right? Read and get a better understanding of how that information can help you on the exam, okay? 3, define roles and responsibilities. So roles and responsibilities should be defined when we're talking about information governance. So this includes your staff members responsible for data collection, storage, access, and security. Know who does what, okay? Roles should be aligned with your organization objectives and meet compliance requirements, okay? 4, establish information quality and integrity. So we have to implement processes to ensure the accuracy, the completeness, and the consistency of the information. So this includes data validation, quality assessments, and we have to do routine audits to identify and address data errors or consistencies. 5, okay? Implement data privacy and security measures. I know this is going to come up again when we get into domain 2, but I want to say here, this is so critical. Safeguarding sensitive information by implementing appropriate security controls. That's an important piece of data governance or information governance, right? How are we, again, going to be responsible for information or data if we're not controlling it in that way? So I want you to think access controls, encryptions, firewalls, because again, remember I told you to look up those policies, right? If policies don't exist, then policies would need to develop. Policies and procedures would need to be developed for these areas or for this area, or specifically for data breaches. How are we going to respond to them and how are we going to mitigate them? So those are some or 5 of AHIMA's best practices when it comes to information governance. So as I'm talking, my mind is it's still going, and I'm thinking about other things that I want to quickly share with you. When we're discussing information governance, it's important to establish a comprehensive record and information management program that's going to include that retention schedules, data classification, as well as those disposal procedures. So this program should comply with legal and regulatory requirements for records management, right? Every state has a record retention schedule or their own record retention schedule. Know what your state is saying when it comes to record retention. And then see how that information compares to our federal laws, such as HIPAA, or our Joint Commission accreditation or CMS requirements. It's important to know all of those different pieces. Something else that came to mind, promoting information stewardship. We have to foster a culture of information stewardship across the organization. And this word comes up in our textbook too. So a lot of people are like, well, what is a data steward, right? So we as HIM professionals, we are data stewards because we have responsibility, right? And we take responsibility for the quality, the accuracy, and security of that information. So we are data and information stewards. We have to provide training and education on information governance, the principles, and the practices. So I think that's it for the most part. But lastly, allow me to say that any information governance program should be constantly reviewed, constantly improved. So we have to embrace the culture of continuous improvement, regardless of the organization we're in, regardless of how well-oiled we want to think that our program is. So we have to adopt to changing technologies, regulations. We have to keep up with those regulations as well as adopt to those changing regulations. And not only that, to the business needs, because the needs of our organizations can change, right? So how do we adapt to that? Or how do we get our policies and procedures to adapt to that? So speaking of, we have to regularly review and update those policies and procedures, as well as our practices, to ensure that they remain relevant and effective. So remember that AHIMA's recommendations are specific to healthcare organizations, but many of these best practices can be applied to information governance in various individuals, in various industries. Okay, so, regardless of whether you work at a hospital or a nursing home or in a non-traditional space, we still need to have policies and procedures when it comes to information governance. So I hope that you found this to be helpful. The next video that I will be posting, in addition to Domain 2, is going to be talking through some of those tasks of the RHIA exam.